Hello, hello, and welcome to the Tenfold AI podcast. I'm Heather. This is Matt. We're sponsored by ProMode.ai, which happens to be our company as well. Hey, Matt, how you doing?
I'm excellent.
It feels like forever that we've done this.
I was looking, it has been like 39 days since we've last recorded.
Yeah, we had some in the can, and then I did some interviews with some other folks, and so we, just haven't gotten on to do this, but I'm super stoked.
I hope I haven't aged too much in the last month.
You look like you've aged 30-ish days.
Yeah. Good. Oh, that's nice. Thank you. Um, yeah, things are good. Maggie and I are leaving for Portugal and Spain tomorrow, which I'm very excited and very I get scared the first time. I've always done this. I was talking to Maggie about it last night, but every time I've ever had a new company and I'm like not 100% able to be fully tethered to it, it causes me a ton of anxiety.
It's like leaving your baby at the daycare the first time.
Yeah. It's so I was like wrestling with that last night, but I was telling her, I was like, this is good. It's happened half a dozen times, but every time that it does happen, I'm always thankful to not be able to be wrapped up in tiny little tasks. It's always a time to I come back thinking like the only mental space I have is for stuff that matters. So in that regard, I'm excited, like simultaneously nervous and excited.
Well, good. I will try
So
my
it's,
best to hold down the fort.
yeah, there's no doubt. No doubt.
Yeah. Well, we have some interesting things to talk about today.
I
I
made our
think
first commercial. You want to watch it?
I would love to watch our first commercial.
Better get your wallet out because
Take my money.
we're putting massive. Okay, I need to make sure I can get audio. Okay, here we go. We're going to put crazy ad spend on this thing. Okay, you ready?
Hi, I'm an AI avatar built by the founders of ProMode. I'm here to trigger your mid-scroll dopamine hit. And also to ensure this isn't your first impression of ProMode. So.
Data, data, data. Embeddings, data. Inference,
Feel behind on the AI curve? Got lots of data? Call me.
What's going on with her hands? What is it with the weird hands? Seriously, guys, if you're AI curious and you're concerned about multiple users and generic training data, give ProMode a shot.
Yeah. That was so cool, man. That was so great. So when do you go to Portugal? That
How
was
terrible
wild.
is that? Gosh, are you still seeing a black screen?
Yes.
You are?
Ew.
So I think
Okay.
that video is so good, I think it broke the recording.
Yeah. It broke something. So before you made that video, was your goal to make it wonky, or were you like, this is just gonna be wonky and we're just gonna go with it?
Yeah, basically what happened is I had like 30 minutes right before we were set to podcast. And I didn't want to get started on anything else. And so I was like, okay, I've figured out this platform enough to put together something ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, okay, to talk more seriously about, so yeah, I just kind of threw that together in 20 minutes before you and I started recording to try to make you laugh.
It was pretty funny.
But on a serious note, just so you've been going on a pretty deep dive on trying to figure out what is the nature of video generation. There's different schools of thought, right? So if you wanted to create a video and perhaps you didn't really care about who the avatar was, what they sounded like, and just kind of like out of the box, a convincing avatar in one scene doing one thing for like 30 seconds. That's super achievable. And AI video does a great job of that. And so I was testing for the purposes of just having a quick, like buttoned up, nice looking intro for some of our use case videos and help desk videos, just so it's like, it does kind of suck looking at a screen recording. And so I thought it'd be cool. Like, okay, let's just like create 2 or 3 avatars that we use. And, we can put some graphics up with them and just like have a human saying, having a human that doesn't look like me saying, here's what we're doing. Here's what we're going to look at. Here's what we're like going to do inside of Pro Mode. But then the minute you get into, I want to create my own avatar. I want them to look like this. I want their gestures to be like that. I want them to seamlessly move in and out of various scenes. Then you have to start like providing different models some seed data. So you can provide an image for each scene and then create a video off of that. You can create a 1-minute video and then create an avatar from there. But yeah, generally speaking, so here's the interesting thing that I kind of learned through all of this. Roughly speaking, the cost to generate 1 minute of like really, really high quality video is probably about $100 would be the compute cost. VO 3.1 is by far the best model for doing this. It struggles with like persistent characters, but it's expensive. Relative to what other people are accustomed to paying for access to models, like what you just witnessed there, I made in an app that costs $29 a month. And to have a really, really good 1-minute video that you would probably, put some paid, do a paid campaign with, you're probably talking in the neighborhood of $200 for that minute. It's 40 cents a second. You probably will have to do some post editing voiceover work with a model like 11 Labs or something like that. You'll need to be using Nano Banana or LoRa to create your reference images and scenes and things like that. It's like no joke. It's
Yeah.
like, it's hard shit. And I would say my takeaway where I'm sitting right now after running this experiment is like, I might just be okay with it being me in front of this microphone,
Yeah.
just because like, I personally don't feel that my skills are good enough to where I wouldn't need to do dozens and dozens of iterations. And it adds up. The compute costs really add up.
Yeah. Did you see I think, was it Red Bull that made the commercial with,
Yep. That's like what the grandma was like, you know, doing a keg
yeah,
stand or something.
maybe. I thought there was one where a guy was being pulled over, like by the cops.
I did see that one. Yes.
Yeah. And it's so interesting, like this environment right now, because when you say $100, and granted, that's assuming the person knows exactly what they're doing in
Yeah.
using all these tools in tandem and have their workflow down. But $100 sounds expensive because it's a one-time deliverable from a piece of software.
Totally.
But if you're the business owner and you're not comparing $100 of software cost to another software, you're comparing that cost to video production fees.
Mm-hmm.
That's where
Well,
it becomes not a question of
yes,
viability. It's like you're talking about 100x at least savings.
100%. But here's my caveat to that. And I think that it probably does still fall on the AI side of the ledger. So that's $100 to $200 of compute costs. These are tokens alone. Like I would say that my ability to jump into using different models and really getting an intuition for how they work, I can jump into them pretty quickly and be like, I know I kind of get the vibe of this model's personality. I was finding myself to get something, again, like this was a joke that I was doing beforehand, but to get something really attempts at production quality stuff. I mean, we ended up having to build a little app on Google Apps Script to manage it all. I mean, it was, had I not had a phenomenal developer just on a private Slack message, and me knowing all of the voiceover and audio models to use, knowing how to get reference images. I mean, your hourly costs on that is probably your hourly cost on the people that would know how to deliver it is going to be pretty dang close to actual like video production still today. But of course, that's going to go down substantially. But it's interesting, like there's a lot of different things that still need to be connected in this space before you're just going to have some creative like content coordinator on your team being able to go into a video gen app and crank something out that you would be proud of.
Yeah.
It's a far cry,
Because it's such a different skill set from what those, copywriters, video producers are doing,
Mm-hmm.
outside of AI. It's a completely different skill set.
Yeah, that's such a great point, because the person that knows how to do the mechanics of video editing, they know like, okay, quick 5-second cuts. Here's roughly the number of syllables that need to be in this scene. And they've just got an eye. You've edited enough videos. You almost begin to look at it visually. You know when to whack things up, make your transitions. Uh, you also need to know that, but then you also need to know how to manipulate all of these models and how to stack
Mm-hmm.
one model on top of another, knowing where a reference image is appropriate versus a reference video versus a reference voice sample. These are all things that you need to insert into the mix at really strategic places. But also for that person to know how to make a good video edit and cut is, I mean, you're looking for a unicorn at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. You really are looking for like that creative lens plus the, technical prowess. It's almost more web developer
Yeah,
than video producer.
exactly. That's probably the best comparison. Like a developer that knows how to write good JavaScript and HTML. You're like analytical, but
Like
you
a full
also,
stack developer.
yep. Like you know exactly what good design is. You've got a good intuition for your margins and your gutters and your spacing and
Mm-hmm.
all of that type of stuff.
Mm.
Yeah, that's probably what this person looks like, is like a really good full stack developer. Find their way through good design, but also understand how the database works underneath.
Interesting. The dawn of the full stack marketing director.
Yeah, seriously. That's here. That's exactly it. You
Yeah.
hit the nail on the head.
Interesting. What about images? Are you doing anything cool with images? We've
So this is,
talked about beta testing, and because in the sales process of Pro Mode, pretty common question, does it generate images? Does it pull images from somewhere? And it's like, not yet, because our rule of thumb is the title of this podcast, Tenfold, right? 10x. It has to be a 10x improvement on the workflow and the quality, right? Kind of our core value moats, if you will. It has to be a 10x improvement compared to whatever else exists today. Canva would be, I think, the most seen rival,
mhm,
and it's not there yet because of all the iterations.
exactly. So this is one thing I'm very excited for this trip. This trip to Portugal and Spain is going to be primarily high level planning and how we're going to think about images with Pro Mode. So there's a few factors, maybe just give you off the top of my head some of the factors that I'm considering from just a first principles perspective. The first principle is that people would prefer to delete things they don't like than to sit and fuck around trying to get something they would like. So that's like principle number one, is that I'm of the belief that users should be given more than they would really ever need and just be able to shave off very quickly, shave off stuff that they don't like. And then, so that's like principle number one. Principle number two is that if there's any text on an image, that the user will want to be able to manually edit that. So for example, like let's just imagine you have like a Happy Halloween graphic, and it just says Happy Halloween, ghouls and goblins, right? And my opinion is that the user would prefer to delete ghouls and goblins and write neighbor. Just do that manually, because I do not think that that edit should be sent back to AI. AI does not do good with those types of edits.
It doesn't.
Yeah. And so there's an element. So that means that if we have any text that goes onto an image, that it should be editable, which means that it needs to be coded. Those can't be AI drawn vectors. It has to be AI coded design so that the user can edit it on a front end. So those are like the two overarching principles of how I'm thinking about Gen AI images. Is
anyone else doing that you know of?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't think that but that's just like we just ended up in a unique position where we were moving data and designs around just a shitload of websites for so long, and just got really good at knowing how do people think about designs, what do they want to edit, like how do they want to edit it, where do they want to replace things. We were just really focused on, these people aren't developers. They just want to be able to update a website, push a landing page. And so you get a good intuition for how people think about that stuff. So it's like, just to me, it's very self-evident that those are some of the things you would need to think about. But I just don't think that many people have gone from trying to build a CMS to what we're doing, especially,
That's very cool. I remember that we had a conversation with a video producer, you and I, many months ago, and she was talking about how she had just come back from a big video and photography conference. And the big thing was, I think it was like vectorizing video, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So that you could edit components of shots. And that was like earth-shattering.
Totally.
Yeah.
So, and this is like, so the third principle, okay, I don't want to because
you don't have to share
I'm not going to share. Yeah, I'm not going to share anything specific. I don't think anybody would be able to figure this out before we do. But the other thing is whatever. Okay, so let's say we've got graphics. So just imagine you got graphics, Happy Halloween, ghouls and goblins, a little pumpkin, company logo, whatever. There's an image behind it. Now, that if that image were created by AI, another thing that I'm thinking of is that it will have to be such to where whatever the user says that they want, it will need to be put through some pretty intense filters. Like that, whatever the user says that they want, it's going to have to be really scrutinized by several LLMs that are referencing some type of table, probably several tables, So, and we'll actually probably talk about this here in a second when we talk about prompting. Like an LLM just really is tuned in to ensuring that it's giving you a response that you would want. And so doesn't have really good inference on the type of image you would want. So that's why I say that we would need to give the user far more images than they would ever want, and they just do away with 2/3 of them. And in the process of doing away with 2/3 of them, then forever we will have a ton of ways to translate the user prompt just to ensure something like that doesn't come out of it. We like narrow their prompt far more than than it would ever be narrowed elsewhere.
Yeah.
And that would increase the likelihood of something favorable coming out.
Kind of like machine learning creative direction. That's very cool. Because you've mentioned many times in recent months, as you're kind of like sharing your progress on this, and I think you talked about creating almost like templates or kind of like boundary lines for each client's creative when we do
Yes,
launch this, and how would you arrive at what that finished product is, knowing what you know about client approvals and creative
exactly.
decision making, which is a train wreck almost always.
Mhm.
So I guess your idea of how to arrive at their kind of desired state is that doing away of 2/3 of
Yes.
images.
Well, and actually, you know what? Now that I think about it, a better way to consider it, you remember that game Battleship?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it is exactly how we would do this is
Mm-hmm.
like the game of Battleship, where you've got I mean, just think about all of these things. So you've got, imagine a Mark 5 is a digital camera. It was like a popular digital camera when you and I were probably like in our early 20s. They had a bunch of different lenses. I'm probably getting the name wrong, but I think Mark 5 was what it was. It was very, very, very famous. So like, imagine you're playing Battleship and you're trying to give somebody a photo. They want a photo. Well, you're going to choose the camera body that you're going to take that photo with. That camera comes with all of these different lenses that you could put on it. And then all of those lenses come with all of these filters that you would put on it, and so on. And you just take that and you extrapolate it. And so, as you're giving the first batch of images, or every time you give a batch of images to choose from, you're basically playing Battleship with all of these just tons
Mm-hmm.
of variables. And over time, if something is rejected, and like the Mark 5 camera with this filter and this lens seems to be routinely rejected, now you're updating the
Mm-hmm.
Battleship, on
Yeah.
your side. Here's where I landed.
Yeah. I like it. Very cool. Okay. I mean, when do you think is that like a 90-day thing? Is that like maybe in a year if we really, I don't know.
Certainly, I would say certainly inside of a year. I would say I'm probably going to come back from this trip with a head full of steam, but I also am like trying to be cautious, like, I'm cautiously optimistic.
Mm-hmm.
I think we'll rip through it, to be honest with you. Just the stability that we have, like, we had a big server migration, really like, I mean, we basically rewrote the entire app over the last 3 months for just like, basically from everything that we've learned, just getting like final versions of a lot of workflows deployed. And so I would imagine if I don't have a big thing like that, just keeping me up at night, I'll go crazy. So I would imagine now that like those big things are deployed, we'll probably get ripping on this one pretty hard. I think 90
Very
days
cool.
feels good. Yeah, I would be very stoked if we had something in beta, before February 1st would feel really nice.
Very cool. So speaking of things we've learned, it's such an interesting journey. This pro mode AI environment, disruptive tech, and selling and ICP and product market fit and all of this. And our tea leaves seem to be reading, we need to go up market. We need to, work on communicating with larger companies who have a little more sophistication in the ranks in their marketing. And it's so fascinating because it's not because Pro Mode is difficult to use. It doesn't take any technical skills. There's no coding, there's no prompting. I've used HubSpot and many other, much more dense softwares, WordPress. I hate them. They're very confusing and hard to step into if you're not an everyday, all day in it person. And even when you are, you're in it every day, all day for a reason because it's slow as hell.
Yeah.
So it's not technically difficult to use Pro Mode, but we're seeing that if the end user's marketing philosophy is mature, if they understand content strategy, like textbook stuff, not just, this is what I've been doing for this small company for the last few years, this must be good marketing. No, people who really understand marketing theory, marketing philosophy, what strategy is, how to build it, those are the people who will be most blown away by the platform.
And I'll
so,
even like
Mhm.
to just put an additional caveat on that. I think that multiple users is like multiple users and sort of multiple media types. And when I say media types is not the right word, I'm struggling with it. But like, okay, multiple users and multiple meanings of marketing. So this is another thing that we are running into is like a company. So when a company sends out like a stakeholder announcement, like an investor letter kind of thing, you and I would call that marketing. I don't know that company would call that marketing, because marketing is a department. To them, marketing is a department that does these things. But I think that, multiple users and like multiple, like marketing means multiple things for a company. I think that would be an additional little like clear problem that is solved just immediately,
Yeah, it's more marketing and communications, kind of companies that have that lens. Because you're right, in the mid-market, the word marketing means one thing, leads.
Yeah. Yep.
It primarily, by a long shot, means leads. Secondarily, a little bit means employer brand building and recruiting. But there's really not a system or much of a desire for a system for things like internal comms, stakeholder announcements and communication, words from the CEO. So that's where we're seeing the most put the cape on that superhero. It's Pro Mode for these bigger enterprise companies that do have communications departments that include marketing, but also PR and internal comms. And that's where it gets very hairy and slow and expensive. And Pro Mode can solve those problems.
Yeah, it's absolutely I just had this like no shit moment recently with we had dinner with our friend Tara and she kept pressing me. I mean, she's tenacious and she was like pushing me. I was like, hey, look at this new website I've been working on. Tell me what you think. And she's like, it sucks. What's the problem? What's the problem? What's the problem? And she kept pushing me. That's not a problem. That's a solution. That's a benefit. That's a feature. Problem. What's the problem? She's like hammering me on this thing until finally I got to the point where I was like, there's a token. If a company has public communications that require tokens over this amount, like we solved that problem. And she's like, perfect. Now tell me that in a way that I would understand, and I was like, duh, that is it. When we're talking about trying to qualify people for promo, we were trying all of these things and it really fundamentally comes down to how many tokens do your public communications require? So first off, if you are interested in using AI in a meaningful way to build public communications, whether it's marketing, investor briefs, whatever the case may be, if that requires anything north of probably 16,000 tokens on a monthly basis, and at least 32,000 tokens need to persist over the course of a year, anything north of that, like, you're going to run into major, major issues with out of the box, with a prompt based chat, with a GPT, with a wrapper. You're going to run into massive issues. You add more than one user that's representing your company in these platforms, you didn't just double the problem, you probably quadrupled the shit show that will occur as a result of this. And this is the fundamental problem that Pro Mode solves. It's a hard one to talk to people about tokens. I mean, when they don't quite know what those things mean yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, so a token is 4 letters, right?
Correct. It's about 3 letters, including space. It's 3/4 of a word is a token.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's 22,000 words.
Yep. Something like that.
So if your company publishes more than 22,000 words, in 2025, you're no doubt using AI to assist with that.
Mm-hmm.
Our position is that's not smart if you're using same source or out-of-the-box AI solutions.
Yeah, if you care about, and it's not just 22,000 words that you're publishing, it is the words that you're publishing plus whatever source information went into publishing those things. So if you're going to publish a help desk article, or even let's say you're Martin Guitars, right? And you have a section on your website that's here's how to clean the fretboard. Whatever product spec sheets that go into that published article that is here's how to clean your fretboard, these count towards the 22,000 as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, we recently had a demo with a company that, and, this is going back to the marketing question, we did a demo with a local company here. They have an awesome marketing program. I mean, it is very much a personal brand. The guy that's doing it is so dynamic and so funny, and he freaking kills it. You would look at their marketing and you would be like, good job. You're heads above your peers in this regard. But then, because it's primarily a personal brand, we talked to them and, kind of roughly added up their tokens. And we're like, listen, you guys are at 14,000 tokens to deliver this big personal brand with tons of videos, but they're 1-2 minute videos. The script isn't that. And there's not much additional stuff being done with it. And it was one of those things where it's man, Pro Mode would probably make this a little bit easier to organize, would make it it would make your freaking, X post slightly more optimized than whatever you're doing now. But it's okay, at the end of the day, it's 14,000 tokens. It would be building you a 3 million token reference library for you to use basically none of it. It just doesn't make sense,
Yeah. And, from a sales perspective, should they be doing blogging and email newsletters and more copy-based content? Sure. That would round out their strategy. However, that's not what they're measuring today. They're used to measuring their Insta followers and their video views and engagement on those videos. So we know that their finger wouldn't even be on the pulse of the other things that Pro Mode would be lifting. And from a sales standpoint, that's not a good sale.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. But yeah, I mean, so to your point, yeah, it is realizing that the fundamental problem is, or I think really it was just a matter of realizing that who actually has the problem has been a little bit, I would say it's caught me off guard a little bit. Who has the problems? But that's, that's a part of business. That's what it is. That's the game.
would agree because when we first started, my thought was mid-market companies, I know what they're spending with agencies. I've sold those engagements a lot of times. I know what they're getting in results for that spend. We can beat it by more than double. We can 10x their output, we can decrease their cost. This is going to be great. But what we're finding is so many in that, so many of those prospects, too many of those prospects just don't even get the fundamentals of marketing strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
why do we need a database with everything about us? Well, don't you care what's being said about you? Well, it's kind of like, I don't know. I want to compare it to like kids and eating. Kids are going to eat what they can understand and like, and maybe don't give them caviar.
Totally.
Save the caviar. They want a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Give them a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, to your point, at the end of the day, these are all humans, right? And so if the engagement has been, I'm working with this agency, I got to talk to them once a month. I don't have to remember to do anything. And I have somebody else to blame if it doesn't work. And I can just fire them and go on to the next agency. It's, now all of a sudden you're asking them to do more. You know what I mean? It's like when they're the ones that are having to do more aren't the ones experiencing the cost savings necessarily. And it's like,
Yeah, that's true.
and they're not, they're not. And so because it's just still then it's just like one person not using that many tokens. So it went from an agency not using that many tokens to a person using inside the company using even less tokens. You don't have the multiple user problem. You don't have the high token count problem. It's just like the fundamentals of the problem aren't aligned in that regard.
Mm-hmm. That
You
makes
want
a
to
lot
like
of sense.
let's make this tangible. So we talked
Yeah.
beforehand about doing a little exercise. So I've got a little Venn diagram here, and I'm going to ask you to just kind of slowly, because I'm going to be typing, but just give me like the last few things that you've done using AI. So this could be you chat GPT. This could be, this could be Perplexity, whatever the case. But let's perhaps, because I think that we'll be able to make the point in retrospect, but let's keep it to work related stuff. So like anything.
Man, I was going to hit you with some curveballs.
Well, I mean, we could do that. I think I could. Yeah, let's just do whatever. Like, tell me the interesting ones, and I think still at the end of the day, the point will come across. So, all right, hit me with it.
Okay. A recipe for challah bread. That was
What's
yesterday.
challah?
Challah, it's like the braided loaves. You can't
Okay.
eat it. Mr. No Gluten.
Okay. Recipe for challah.
Okay. Email to podcast producers.
Okay.
How to remove gel nail polish at home. Couldn't get the damn things off.
Yes.
Okay. Best glue for plastic. Because my kid ripped the visor off my car. Okay. Edit an email. Side effects of NuvaRing birth control. It wasn't for me. It's for someone else I know. Okay. Image redesign for link. Podcast questions for a podcast guest. And the last 10 Super Bowl performers.
Lord, that was funny. Okay. Last 10 super.
Reading my diary.
Okay. Will you? I mean, if it is too sensitive, you don't have to. What's going on? Who's this Super Bowl guy? Wasn't there everybody freaking out about a guy performing at the Super Bowl?
I guess. Bad Bunny.
Okay.
He was in the new Happy Gilmore.
Okay. Okay.
He was the caddy. And he was very, very fun in that role. My kids knew exactly who he was.
No way. Bad Bunny. That's so funny. I thought in the new Happy Gilmore movie, I honestly thought that caddy was the original caddy's son. And it was kind of just like a nod to it, but that's Bad Bunny.
Well, he's like a Hispanic fellow.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't really speak English in the movie.
Okay. Okay. All right. So let's plot all of these things on this Venn diagram here. So generally speaking, LLM actions kind of fall into one of three categories: research, planning, and assembly. So planning would be like brainstorming, research, what are the side effects of NuvaRing, assembly, redo this image, write this email for me. And there's obviously overlap in all of these things. So they can be used separate from one another. So let's do this. Recipe for challah is probably somewhere right in the middle of assembly and research. Get the recipe, assemble it into a usable. Not only do I need the ingredients, I need the, like, how do I do it all?
Recipe format, yeah.
So email to podcast producers is probably a little bit more on the assembly, maybe a little overlap into planning. Nail polish removal, probably squarely in the research, perhaps a little bit towards planning. Best glue for plastic, probably right next to our nail polish situation. Side effects of NuvaRing here in research. Edit and email, probably decent overlap. Assembly and planning. Image redesign would probably also kind of be probably squarely in the assembly if you had the image beforehand. Let's see here. Podcast question for guests. So we're like, I would actually kind of put this one pretty close to the middle, because you probably had some reference information about the guests. Like, here's a little bit about them. So there's probably some research. I'm planning this, and also help me assemble a list of questions. That's probably good, like solid overlap of all of them. Okay, so last 10 Super Bowl performers, we're going to drop over here into research, and then that's just empty. Okay. So you can kind of see how pretty much any action would fall somewhere on this Venn diagram. And so when you use a tool like ChatGPT, you're using the same agent for all of these things. So you have one user that is using the same agent for all of these things. And the agent doesn't quite the agent knows that you want a recipe for challah. Like, it understands these things, but it is not, this agent is not exactly considering that from your perspective, this is you planning for a podcast. It doesn't understand, it understands assembly really well, actually. And it kind of understands research, but generally all that agent is thinking about is like, what is the next token that Heather would want from me? You know what I mean? It's not exactly ingesting the tasks in the way that we feel that it is. They're just really good at telling us the next token, you know? And so now now imagine that. So if we know that an AI, an LLM, an agent, we know that it wants to give you the next token that you want. That's how they're tuned. Now, let's say that we have two users accessing this thing. So it's trying to attune to two people asking similar questions. Well, okay, I just lost free shapes. Now, now all of a sudden we have all of these things. Depending upon how this person prompts it, there's probably going to be some overlap, but it'll look about like this. So you see, we're like overlapping the recipe for challah. But if you add a second user in here, the way that that person's going to word it is going to be slightly different. So you have two people asking for the same thing in different ways from a system that is tuned to try to give whoever its user is at that time, I want to give them the next token that will make them happy. And so you can imagine now, as we only have 9 or 10 examples in here, and we've just shown what happens when you add a different user into the mix. Now imagine hundreds of tasks a month, 3 or 4 users across all of these, and you only have a persistent, there's only one persistent memory in this thing, and it's not relative to all of these questions, and then you add a different user into the mix. You can understand how this would get sketchy quickly, right?
Yes, it blurs everything at some point.
Exactly. And this is the downside, I think, to people believing that an agent is some magical force, or I think there's a tendency, because the models are so well tuned to telling us the next few tokens that would make us happy, and they're constantly re-ranking just whatever tokens would make my user happy is how they're built. And so you can understand how really quickly this gets very, very janky really, really quickly. So
So this happens when a company has a I don't know what they would even call it today. Like a closed system copilot or something.
Exactly.
This is the company sanctioned AI tool. This is our chat GPT. Use it, it's safe. You're saying in those scenarios, this is the risk.
Correct. Yes. Because every time a user asks a question of that thing, it's still prompted, so that the copilot that's being used in that company is totally different for each user based upon how that user is prompting copilot. There's no guardrails between research, planning, and assembly.
Because there's no step of cleaning or encrypting the data once the user says, give me this thing. It's just a straight prompt, which is creating this ultimate confusion.
Even slight variations in the same prompt will change the way that a model behaves in that moment for that task. So if you were to execute AI at scale, let's talk about how that might look. The first thing that you'll notice here is we don't have overlap over everything. The overlap is strategic, and every Venn is its own agent. So you have an agent, and your agents are very finely tuned by how much probability should be allowed in the action. So when you go to assemble something, for example, so when you go to assemble code that becomes a web page for your company, you don't want this agent to be super creative. You want it to be operating within the tightest bounds possible. So you want to really narrow down the amount of probability that you allow this agent to operate with. Same thing down here when it comes to our research. Like if you're putting in some product specs into a model, first off, you want to be using an agent that is like tuned to be able to receive and categorize highly technical information. And you don't want a lot of probability existing inside of that agent. Because if you put, you know what I mean? If you put in like the guitar manual for this Martin guitar behind me, you want every letter of that. Like if you're Martin Guitars, I want every letter of this thing in the model exactly as it is. We paid a bunch of really smart humans for every letter that is inside of this thing. We do not want this model to interpret what any of it means for anybody, just the raw input, no probability, no AI mixing this up at all.
Yeah.
And so you want to create this strategic separation of agents, and you create the separation of agents by how much probability you allow them to operate with. And so then when we get into so first off down here, we have 5 databases, and there's an agent that manages all of those databases. All of the agents that are managing your data sets, again, they are like the most robotic, deterministic functions ever. We are getting max information into each of these, and we're protecting them. They're like, this is our castle. Like no AI bullshit is allowed in here. But then we can step out and let's begin to add a little bit more probability in the mix. And now we have a user that is allowed to conduct some research. Now, so you want this user to be able to have a creative idea. You want them to have an interesting thought, and you want them to like be able to look at the owner's manual of a Martin guitar and say, this might be useful information for these customers. So you want this person to be able to operate, to be able to assemble research of their own, do new research, like combine different information and data sets together. You want them to be able to experiment with pulling from these very rigid data sources and assembling it in interesting ways. But you don't want any nonsense in there. You want to say, hey, these databases are partitioned. There's no bullshit getting in here. But we will allow a user to have a crazy idea of combining these things and seeing if there's anything worthwhile in it. So we want to increase our probability a little bit when we allow the user to conduct research inside of this agent. And then when we get to planning, so now we allow for just max creativity because we have partitioned off our source data and gradually increased the probability distribution that's allowed in it. You can achieve maximum creativity, maximum flexibility with just absolute confidence because in here, this planning agent is working with such fixed data sets, and the planning agent is fully removed. It only receives what comes through this research agent. So because everything here is like super pre-approved, super locked down, like the extent to which you can do anything is just combine different data sets from in here. Then once you get to planning, you've already established your guidelines of how should you behave, and all of the guidelines are coming from a pre-approved location. So then you can just allow users to go wild in the planning stages, with just absolute confidence. And then we get to like lower probability when it comes to assembling it. Another key feature of an AI system like this would be that you have user entry points. So you have an entry point at all steps in here, because you might have people on your team that you don't want adding new data into here. So you want to say, all right, you can, like, you crazy people can come in here. We'll let you go sick with planning, but there's not a chance you're going to contaminate any of this. And so you want to not only create agent partitions between your steps, but you also want to create user partitions in between those steps. So you want, like, again, if you want to have one type of person in an organization be able to add source data, you have that opportunity. If you want another layer of management to assemble, like to plan and think about how we're going to use all of this information in our communications, you have that entry point. And then you have an entry point for what would be like the least strategic and probably most junior kind of like workhorse on the team can now come into the assembly step and just like get everything dialed for publication.
This makes a lot of sense. So the bottom person, and I'm imagining, let's say we have a medical device manufacturing company. This bottom person for the research could be the compliance officer who's making sure everything's compliant and accurate scientifically, the CEO, depending on the size of the company, or the CMO, if it's a larger organization. They're sort of the guard dogs of the research, making sure only the most relevant and helpful research pieces are added to this. Research could also be the case studies, any form of data that's entering this environment. And then up the chain in planning is more the marketing director who's building strategies within ProMode, leaning on those research pieces, but not directly, they're not adding those or anything like that. And then the top person in assembly is like a marketing coordinator who's going in and adding images and spaces and
Yes,
scheduling for publish. Yeah.
exactly. Yep, 100%. And this could be, and again, this could be this person that's adding the research. This could be a president, CEO who is like on Twitter all day as well. You know what I mean? This could be whatever you put into this. The point is that a human had to touch it. This is a really important step. Like, I really think, for two reasons, right? Just for continuity throughout a large, complex organization, you want a human to be looking at everything that goes into it. I think that the idea of letting a research agent go out into the wild on behalf of your company, A, you're just asking for corrupt data. And B, it's like, do you really just want to, like, this is like the baseline of your company identity, how you communicate, what do you talk about? How do you differentiate? And so if you're saying that we're just going to do it the same way that everybody else is doing it, we're not going to have any unique human curated action down here. To me, that is not only risky from a data standpoint, but to me, it's just like foolish from a competitive advantage standpoint. I mean, the idea that, like, if you're if you're a mason jar manufacturer and like your competitor is also like a different color mason jar manufacturer. You're having two people go and use like deep research on Chat GPT. Like, what do you think is going to come out of each of those things? It's going to be the exact same thing. If you're, you know what I mean? If you're like, hey, build me a marketing strategy for 2026,
Mm-hmm.
what do you think is going to happen? Like
Yeah.
there's zero strategic advantage in that.
Yeah. And, I'm just imagining a CMO or an executive watching this and seeing this and saying, that looks too complex, or, that's too many steps. But really, like, the research phase could be quarterly. Like, that's the executive involvement, quarterly. The planning could be monthly. That's the marketing director or CMO setting up strategies and running them. And then the assembly coordinator could be weekly. So it's more organized, but it's actually far more efficient. It might look complex on paper, but man, if you codified the workflow and how the data is flowing in a larger company and could somehow diagram it,
Yeah,
it would be insane.
totally.
Like the amount of back and forth emails and corrections and no, I didn't tell you to publish that one and I meant that other one. I told you we're not using that research anymore. Like the confusion, miscommunication that happens in communications is almost unquantifiable because it is so crazy.
Yeah, and like this diagram doesn't do a good job of representing it. Maybe I should have made the circles different sizes, but if you think about as we're moving from the bottom of this to the top of this up here, the number of items, the number of individual items that need to be looked at, reviewed, and approved, I'm telling you, it goes from like this. I mean,
Yeah.
we're talking by the time you're up here, you really want to have you'll want to go through this workflow. Right now, everybody's just accustomed to this. We review up here, but we got to review 150 things a month. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
insane. But like if you can say, well, if we review this stuff in the research phase, we're reviewing that one time. That is a one review that gets passed down the chain of command. And then we have somebody in here planning, and their review, the stuff that they need to review, is a little bit more than the first person. But then by the time you're up here at assembly, there's no external data that is in the assembly piece. So now all of a sudden, those 150 things that need to be looked at by somebody, you'll eventually get to the point to where like that junior content coordinator, it's like, I've done the planning. All of the source data is there. That's been reviewed once. And like, just go, just get it all done. It'll be fine. Format it, make sure the images are good. Uh, well, actually, not even images, because images can be reviewed at the planning phase. So not even
Mm-hmm.
that, you know. So
Right.
if you're really picky about images, that can be a part of your planning phase. And there's another thing that I wanted to like hit on. Sorry.
No, it's good.
So you had talked about like this research being a quarterly exercise. I mean, if that, because like, don't forget that you are currently sitting on gigabytes, if not terabytes, of data that has been approved by a person. They're in a drive in your company. They're not being used. So you already have all of this. And
Mm-hmm.
the percentage of the business intelligence that you have in your company today compared to how much of it gets used is astronomically low. You're maybe
Mm-hmm.
using 10% of the available data. So there's also this like I would even say, as I've been building out our pro mode, to me, I mean, granted, we'll be around for more and more years, but after I kind of got all of our databases set, I'm thinking about this as like an annual exercise now. Just like once a year, go through, delete stuff, place stuff that I didn't like, just like flag it, mark it for potential deletion. Like, okay, we're not using it that much, but just like, don't forget. I mean, if you're a company that's been, I think I read a statistic that the average company amasses like 300 gigabytes of qualitative business intelligence annually. So if you've been around for 5 years, you've got over a terabyte of source data that you've already approved. It's already been approved through your chain of command. And so you're like up and running with that. You don't need to go through. And now you have an agent managing that data in a very specialized vacuum. And a human has to say, release this up the workflow. And like, but a human already approved it before it went in. I mean, the amount of like ease that this would provide to a company that wants to use AI. We're concerned about, we've got 8 different people that manage comms in this company. Maybe your intuition is telling you, like fucking Barbara's crazy. Have no, like, I wonder what Barbara is telling Copilot. That scares me. Like, if you're allowing Barbara to upload shit into your Copilot, that would keep me up at night personally.
Barbara.
But like, so like you already have all of this data. It's just like none of it is getting put to use. And so it's like, God, you've done all this work. You paid McKinsey, God knows what, to do whatever. Let's get this in the flow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we just had a conversation with a new client a week or so ago, and she was like, the content looks good, but I'll have to have the owner of the company review it all first to make sure it's accurate. And I'm like, well, did he review your database? Right? We call it your fingerprint profile. Well, not really. He told me to. And I said, okay, his time will be better spent reviewing your fingerprint profile, which is the definition of your brand voice in detail, the definition of your company, the definition of what you do and how you do it, what makes you different, what problems do you solve, all of this laid out neatly within Pro Mode. He needs to go in and review all of that and make sure it's accurate. Because if it is, that content is accurate. So it's like we can explain it a few times in the sales process, but there's a learning curve to that lesson that, hey, reviewing content on a per content piece basis is not what we're doing anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like that should be for the marketing coordinator to give it a scan through for formatting. Do I want more spaces here? Would I prefer a shorter post? We'll just lop off the last paragraph, make sure the image is good in your calendar. Scheduling, do we have a post every single day? Got it. That's where review on a per content piece basis should happen. But review at the executive level should happen way back
Absolutely.
in the database.
Yes, you're like, to highlight what you're saying here. Forever, public communications inside of a company, the most senior person has been standing between deliverables and publication. And oftentimes the most junior person has been operating down here. So really what I mean, AI fundamentally is it's automation, right? And it's automation using source data. And so it AI will AI flips all of this on its head, and it instead of saying we're going to have the most junior person going out and researching, and then the less junior person will then filter out the stuff of their research that they don't like, and then a more senior person now is working on assembly, and then the most senior person is approving each assembled item. What AI does is it flips that entire workflow on its head, and it says, hey, all of this stuff is now automated. Your most senior person should be validating your source data. This is now the most important thing in the organization. So now what we need to do is our approval needs to begin down here. And then the just astronomical exponential improvement by just flipping that approval down to source data, because automation runs up the stack now. Not replacing anybody. Again, we still need these users need to be able to instruct a model. How do you use this? But the approval of the source data is now the key, most senior role in an
Yes.
organization. And that's completely opposite before we had automation to handle the rest of the flow. This is our
I'm
biggest
so
challenge, I
glad you
think.
pointed this out. It's so true, and that is the core of the kind of missing light bulb in some of our even clients, right?
Hmm.
But it's so true because that's also where the efficiency vector is. If you're an executive and you're spending 2 hours a week reviewing content for publish, stop. Like,
Yeah.
spend 2 hours a year or 2 hours a quarter if you're aggressive reviewing your research, your source data, adding to that, wrangling people to develop data feeds into that. Okay, we've got call transcripts there. We've got, dusty binders full of valuable data here. We've got spec sheets over there. Like, be the kind of guardian of that data and procure that throughout your company, add it, approve it, and then the more junior roles, middle management and junior roles, are up funnel in the
Yes.
creation and approval of that content. And where it's so efficient and it can be a headcount replacement is now you don't need 3 to 5 people in that research category as marketing assistants, coordinators, all sorts of roles in enterprise companies. You just need like one
Hmm. Hmm.
who's managing that, and that's the executive who's feeding that.
Totally.
And then you need that brand visionary, the CMO or marketing director, and then that person who's going in weekly and approving content.
Precisely. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It's like, and it's not, yeah. And if you really think about it, in the average organization, let's say you're doing north of $500 million a year, like, this is an interesting thing about AI. It is not the it's not the low skill workhorses that it's a headcount replacement for. It is actually like upper management. It's like upper management and executive hour replacement.
Mhm.
So if you can take an executive from spending 2 hours a week approving public comms, that those 2 hours a week are certainly worth more in payroll to that company than replacing a full-time employee by a long shot. I mean, most executive pay is like 50x what your junior level employee is. So in that regard, like 1 hour a month, no, what would that be? Almost like 1 hour a week. If you could save an executive 1 hour a week of time, that's the equivalent of saving a full-time employee headcount on a junior level.
That's
So
true.
there's like additional ways to consider where the AI lift comes from, and that is certainly in executive time. And furthermore,
Hmm.
like, talking about moving the approval to the source data step in an organization. I mean, it really is people that are like the true experts in their field and have been doing it for a really long time, that they can look at an article, they can glance at a piece of legislation, something in their Twitter feed catches their eye, and like their ability to recognize that is just far, like, heads and above any low, like, junior employee with a couple years experience. That they're not going to be able to recognize that stuff. I mean, you see it all the time. You probably have stuff in your news feed, and it's like in your subconscious, you're like, yeah, that's really good. Like, our first, like, our first content coordinator that we hire is not going to be able to do that, you
Right.
know? And so it really like
It's
puts the
so
max experience and max value, really maximizes the value of everybody's time and experience.
yeah. And I like to use cooking analogies a lot because in a lot of ways, I do think cooking is something I know more about than anything else on an instinctual level almost. It's a
Hmm.
passion. But we went to a restaurant in Tulsa for Rob's birthday last week, or a couple weeks ago, at the Mayo Hotel, which is the hotel where like Tulsa King is filmed and or
Nice.
parts of Tulsa King, and we really like that show. So we went there, and I told them it was his birthday, so we went back to the kitchen. They offered us the like chef's table in the kitchen, which we only sat at for a moment because it was very hot in there. But I was just reminded of how much I love that like nice dinner spot,
Hmm.
like nice restaurant kitchen experience, like watching how the chefs interact with each other.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, "Yes, chef. What's next, chef?" And there's just so much like code in there.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
there's a code of communication and everything. And in, nice restaurants, the chef inspects the ingredients at the top of every night. The meat comes
Yep.
in, the vegetables come in, they inspect the ingredients. Which ones are up to their standards, right? And then the line chefs and the sous chefs get to work, and the chef is kind of surveying and he's tasting the wine and he's like in the mix. And then every so often off the line, the chef is tasting, but he's not tasting every dish, right?
Hmm.
He's tasting like 3 times throughout the night to make sure this dish is up to standard, right? Like 1 spoon from each pot that is happening of the soup, right? That's the same thing we're proposing
Yeah.
with workflow and marketing. Like if you're the executive, inspect your ingredients, that's your
Hmm.
data. And then, up the line, every now and then pop in and check the content. Are we looking good? Is everything on track? It's so cool.
Totally. Yes. And like, and the plating, okay, so a couple of things. If you've looked at 50,000 carrots, you can scan some carrots and be like, you can whittle it out really quickly, like the stuff that's not going to work if you've looked at 50,000 carrots, right? And then secondly, what a terrible waste of time for that chef to sit there and assemble every single plate. That's a mechanical action. This goes here, that goes there, the schmear there, bing, bang, boom. This is a mechanical action that happens the exact same way every single time. And then the one thing I found to be really cool in there was when you talk about the chef going through and tasting. Like, yes, every once in a while, the chef goes through there and is like, I approved all of these ingredients. As they're getting assembled, I'm going to just taste it real quick. Like, I know how
Mm-hmm.
it should taste. Let's just make sure that the assembly of the ingredients is happening in the way that it should. Right. But like, that restaurant would just go to it would be an absolute disaster if the chef had to taste every single thing before it left the kitchen. You know what I mean? And was assembling every single plate. Like, what an
Yeah.
absolute waste of time. Nobody on the team gets good at anything. That it just, the inefficiency is not worth the delicious meal, because at the end of the day, you got a room full of hungry people and you got to get shit out quickly. And it's also
Yeah.
got to be up to a standard.
Ugh, that's so cool. Yeah, inspect your ingredients
Yeah,
and then let her rip.
totally. And if you want to have good ingredients, like every other, if Chili's is buying all of their ingredients from Cisco and you want to somehow stand out, like, I mean, in this example, like Cisco, if you want to be a client, we'll take you. Sorry, I don't mean to talk shit, but
I
I
saw a
think,
documentary about them recently, and it was
really,
how
I can
like
only imagine.
almost every chain restaurant in the US gets their food from the same place.
Yeah, totally.
That's why the mozzarella sticks all taste the same.
Yep. So, like, if you want to have a restaurant that tastes different or unique or whatever, like, you can't be getting the same ingredients as every other
Ugh,
restaurant. Like,
it's so
you
true.
you know
Cisco is
you
ChatGPT.
exactly. Yeah, you can't be, of
You have
course
farm to
you
table, then
yeah,
you got to shake the hand of the farmer.
exactly. Yeah, you like you don't want to be using the same source data as everybody else when the possibility exists to assemble your own. Like, what are we doing? Of course,
Very
that's
cool.
the route you would go.
Well, that was a very informative, rather dense, but very helpful lesson. And as always, I thought for a minute that I wasn't going to understand at a certain point. I'm like, he's losing me. And then you brought it around. So thank you for that.
That's good. I need the practice.
Yeah, very cool. Well, this was a fun episode. Tenfold AI podcast. I'm Heather. This is Matt. If you are a marketing nerd like we are, and you happen to work at a company and you're like, yeah, we need a better AI marketing platform, hit us up. We'll show it to you. We're very transparent in how we show ProMode, talk about ProMode, and we're happy to see if it's a fit. And hit us up, our website, promode.ai. We'll see you next time.
Bye.